Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Look, I know some of you aren't jazzed about politics, but the reality is politics is life, and if you don't participate in politics because you're stuck on the far extremes of discussions and you only want to talk to people on the far left or the far right, well then you're part of what I think is the minor or the minority, 10% of people, that's 5% on each side, who just go la 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 when they hear opinions from the other side. I like to consider myself pretty dang in the middle. 51-49 is generally what I call myself. And folks, when somebody messes up, whether it's on the left or the right, I talk about it. And The Economist just came out with a piece that absolutely slams the Democratic Party and Joe Biden, and we've got to talk about this. This is not to try to be like a right-wing piece of propaganda. If anything, it's to be a wake-up call to those on the left that there needs to be some change, some pretty big change. Because when The Economist, which is a pretty radically centrist paper, but quite frankly, between you and I, they're pretty liberal. They lean quite left when their discussions and their reports, their radio reports, everything. It's leans left, okay? Let's just be real. When we see a duck, we call it a duck, okay? The Economist leans left. And they just had a pretty big piece that slams Biden and the Democratic Party pretty hard. Let's talk. The article starts off by saying that every president has years to be historic, but that no president has been historic like Joe Biden because no president since the 1950s has had this low of an approval rating this early into their term. This is compounded by the fact that even 67% of Democrats think the economy is doing poorly, and 78% of Democrats think the economy and country is heading in the wrong direction. We're even at the point now where more than half, 64% of Democrats want to see a different presidential candidate on the ticket in 2024 and not Joe Biden for a rerun. That's pretty wild. Usually the president gets elected, goes for a rerun, and the party supports them. But folks, here are the arguments. First, they argue that Joe Biden has done very little with his 18 months in office, and inflation has absolutely killed his opportunity to now get anything done. Remember back in the days of January 5th, right before the January 6th insurrection, riot, freedom rally, whatever you want to call it, January 5th was a really interesting day. It was actually a really interesting night, and I live streamed it. The reason it was so interesting was because it was when we had the Georgia election, which helped us understand the balance of Joe Biden's presidency. At this point in January, we already knew that Biden would be the president. We already knew that the House of Representatives would be Democrat. But we did not know what would happen with the Senate. The Senate was up for grabs. Joe Biden, on the morning of January 5th, said, if you elect the Democrat to the Senate, we will get another stimulus check passed, which is true. Passed another $1,400 stimulus check, which by many accounts wasn't needed and probably contributed substantially to inflation, but Democrats ended up winning that seat. And the argument was that, wow, whether you were a Republican or a Democrat, the argument was there was no question Democrats would be in power for the next 2 years and massive things would get done. Even some Republicans were excited that marijuana or electric vehicles or solar energy, green energy, not the Green New Deal, but just green energy initiatives and changes for the economic climate and a calmer political environment. There was a lot of excitement that would be coming and a lot of new bills and investment into America that would be coming because one party would have control for 2 years. And the idea was that so much could get done. Whether it was good or would end up being bad, at least stuff would get done. Because we were tired of the 2 years of stalemate that we had after Donald Trump's first presidency, or during Donald Trump's first presidency, after they passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act between 2017 and 2018. We had nothing that happened between 2019 and 20, and then obviously we had the pandemic. We were in stalemate, and we hate stalemate. We like to see things get done. Well, the thought was at least things would get done here. Even if you were a Republican and disturbed by this, at least things would get done. Well, Biden wasn't able to muster up the will to get much done. much beyond that $1,400 stimulus check, and we got the infrastructure package, the actual hard infrastructure package, not the soft and social infrastructure package, which was supposed to be initially part of that package, but then was broken up into two different packages. Those are things that got done. But folks, after this, almost nothing got done. And at this point, people are looking and saying the country needs parties that actually represent what the voters want and not the extremes. And in the last 18 months since Joe Biden was elected, it seems like the Democratic Party has crept into this insane rhetoric of defund the police, abolish immigration enforcement, just let everybody in, whether they have a job or can get a job, whether they're criminals or not, just let everybody in. Let's kill capitalism, let's relabel women as birthing people, and let's inject anti-racism into the classroom. That's what the Democratic Party has done with all their power over the last 18 months. And I want to be very clear here. I think it's obvious, and it should be really obvious, that generally more cops equal less crime, right? Think about that for a moment. When you prosecute less people, crime goes up. Imagine that. Look at San Francisco. Their district attorney is getting recalled because they've prosecuted so little crime that crime has skyrocketed. Surprise, surprise, less enforcement, crime goes up, and people are pissed. When you compare to Miami, a city that has actually increased funding for the police, imagine this. Crime actually went down. Now, I'm not a biologist, but I don't think 95% of us, unless you're on that extreme 5% of the curve, need a biology degree to tell you what a woman is. That a woman is somebody with a vagina, a uterus, and ovaries. And if somebody wants to identify as a woman, fine. That can be respected. I can respect that. That's fine. But that person is not a biological woman. Now, jump over to California, for example. California has gone insane with Democratic priorities. 50% of our farmland is dead because we don't have enough water. Yet what does our governor do with a rare surplus that we got from capital gains in 2020 and 2021? Massive capital gains, which are taxed at ordinary higher tax rates in California. What is California doing? Well, we're not building more desal plants to bring more water. We're not bringing in aqueducts to bring more water in. We're certainly not teaching financial education in our schools. We're not dealing with homelessness. We're not taxing less. No, we're sending stimulus checks to individuals making up to $500,000 branded as inflation relief checks. True story, coming to you in October. Completely ridiculous. And that's why I'm embarrassed to say I even live in California. The Democratic Party has gone bonkers. But folks, I don't think that Democrats in general are bonkers. I think unfortunately we're voting for people who throw people into office who then go extreme with a woke mentality and focus on things to try to buzz up more social media drama, to try to appeal to the loud 5% of individuals, and everybody else just ends up pissed with a government that's less functional. And this is why The Economist goes as far as suggesting that if Democrats don't change, there'll either be a return of Donald Trump or maybe even a more extreme version of him, which some folks, in fact, I would say 50 to 60% of the people watching this video are like, please bring Trump back. And that's because Democrats have totally squandered the opportunity that they had and have left a nasty taste in the mouth of many, even Democrats, who might want to switch parties. Even Elon Musk is now claiming he is switching parties and might be for the first time, in his opinion, voting for, or at least the way he puts it, voting for a Republican. Now, of course, Democrats aren't really learning that they've got to change their narrative, because even as recently as last week, Democrats and Joe Biden are still blaming inflation on Putin, saying, don't worry, inflation's going to go down because gas prices just went down 40% or 40 cents, not 40%, okay? Dude, Biden, you're being tone deaf. This has nothing to do with just gas prices and Putin. It has everything to do with the fact that everything is getting more expensive. Labor is getting more expensive. Rent is getting more expensive. Food is more expensive. Services are more expensive. Insurance for your car, for your home is more expensive. Going to the dentist is more expensive. Everything is more expensive. It's not just, oh, hey, don't worry, gas is getting a little cheaper. Yeah, well, when something doubles and then goes down a little bit, we don't want to celebrate that just that little bit went down. It's still a lot higher. And this tone deafness is killing the Democratic Party. We need some realism in the party. We need people to speak to us about the real issues that us 90% care about, which is better schools, which is better use of government money, not money getting funneled into wealthy chip companies so Nancy Pelosi can profit off her call options and stocks. It's dealing with unacceptably high crime. It's dealing with terrible schools. It's dealing with investing in our future more than China does. We used to, back in the 50s and 60s, invest in America and in Americans more than any other country in the world. Today, we're in like third or fourth place. China is blowing us out of the water with the amount of money that they're spending in their futures. Because think about it, kids in school today are the next scientists and engineers that are supposed to innovate and propel us forward. But if we're failing them, what kind of future do we have? And so this is where the Economist goes as far as saying, look, if Mr. Biden truly wants to save the soul of his nation, he will have to start with the soul of his own party. How about instead of focusing on putting racism or gender identity into our elementary school education, we focus on crime, legal immigration, streamlining legal immigration so we have more workers to fill the many jobs that we have right now. We have 1.9 job openings per unemployed person. Let's bring in people who can help us build our country, increase our GDP, and prevent a recession. Let's focus on the real things like mental education, financial education, and building wealth for Americans rather than focusing on these ideologies that only a nominal amount of people actually care about. They shouldn't be getting airtime in Congress. Let them have airtime in social media, but let's focus on the big things first. And once we solve the big things, then maybe in the future, we can deal with those minor things. Now, I just want to be crystal clear. This is not to try to say that you have to be super left or super right. It's simply to say that I think the vast majority of us, and let me know in the comments down below, just say, I agree, Kevin, with that summary. Here's maybe even something extra that you want to add to the list. Here are just some of the things that I think are so critical for us to think about. Jobs, we can all agree on that. More legal immigration, energy independence, innovation, mental education, financial education, and better schools. These are big, huge priorities. Why are we spending so much time ignoring these and focusing our debates on things that, in my opinion, are substantially less critical? I'm not saying they're not important. They're just not as critical as these yet. There's so much we can do. And there's so many more critical things that belong on this list. Before we start talking about things like defund the police or critical race theory in elementary school or identity politics and teaching my 4-year-old what it means to identify as a boy versus a girl, why don't we talk about this first?